guys, welcome to today's lesson. So today we're going to be looking at solving some quadratic equations, right? So this is gonna go from completing the square, factorizing, simultaneous equations, taking out a square root, and all of those other nice, beautiful things that have to do with quadratic equations. But remember, before we get there, we need to look at exactly what is a quadratic equation, because if we do not understand what we're working with, then clearly we'll not be able to then work with what we do not understand. But for now, let's look at our roadmap of what we are actually going to do today. So remember, I just said it's going to be taking out a square root, completing the square, some quadratic formula for questions that you mainly cannot factorize, and then factorizing, and some simultaneous equations. Now, the main thing that you need to think about is what is it that factorization is all about, right? You need to look at what exactly is factorization about. And if something cannot be factorized, what then, right? What then if something cannot be factorized? So that's what you need to just think about, because that's the main thing that we are doing when we talk about quadratic equations. Our keywords will be a quadratic equation and also factorize, because really that's the main question that they normally use under some quadratic equation. So we have what you call the principle of solving. The principle of solving says that if A multiplied by B is equal to 0, then you either have A is equal to 0 or you have B is equal to 0. Why is this the case? It's because if I say 2 multiplied by 3 is equals to 0, it means this will definitely either need to be 0, so that when I multiply with the 3 I get a 0, or the 3 needs to be the 0, so that when I multiply it with the 2 it gives me a 0. Because remember, this equal sign means that you are talking about a relationship between these two sides, that they must exactly be the same, right? They must both amount to 0. Now, a quadratic equation is an equation of the second degree. What do I mean? At least one term needs to be squared, right? And the standard form is normally given by ax squared plus bx plus c. But because we're talking about an equation, we then need to include an equal to 0 there, or an equal to any other number. But the standard formula is normally ax squared plus bx plus c, where the a, the b, and the c are constants. The a and the b, we normally call them coefficients, and then c is the actual constant, like any number for that matter. Even 0 can be the c, but the a and the b are normally called coefficients because they are in front of a variable. Now, to solve a quadratic equation by factorization, one thing that you need to make sure is that the order is correct. So at times I will give it to you, maybe let's say as 3x plus x squared minus 2, right? As soon as you see something like this, you first need to make sure that the x squared is the leading term. When I say leading term, I mean that it must be the very first term that starts, and then the rest of the terms will then continue. So the correct order actually says that the exponents need to be in descending order from the first one up until you get to the last one. So see here, you know it does have an exponent, which is x is equal x to the exponent of 0, which is the same as 1. That's why it's just c. So the exponent of the first term is 2. It goes down, it becomes 1. It goes down, it becomes 0. That's what the descending order is about. Then you need to test for a common factor. Can I take out a common factor from the terms that I have? If yes, do that and then factorize after. But if you cannot take out a common factor, or even after you've taken out the common factor, you then look at the sign of the last term, right? So I said it's ax squared plus bx plus c. So this last term will be the plus there. That will be the sign, right? So if that sign is a positive, Then your brackets will either be a plus and a plus or a minus and a minus. But if this last sign is then a negative, your brackets will then be a plus and a minus or a minus and a plus, depending on which one you put where. But I can advise you to always start with the positive one. It really makes your life easier going forward. Now, let's look at some examples that have to do with this, right? So the first one here, we need to solve for x. The first question has to do with the principle of solving that I was talking about. So let's look at what we need to do. So remember it said, if I have a times b is equal to 0, then my answers will be either a is equal to 0 or b is equals to 0. Now I always get people asking me, why do we use or? It's because it's either this or that. It cannot be either this and that. That wouldn't really make sense. So it's either you choose this one or you take that one, but both of them do work, especially when it comes to a quadratic equation. But when it's a square root, then there's a different story there that we need to discuss. But we'll talk about that when we get there. For now, let's just solve this one. So my a here will be the x, then my b will be the whole of x plus 3. So it means it will be x is equal to 0 or x plus 3 equal to 0. And then you know to solve for x means that x must be the subject of the formula. It makes it x equal to minus 3. And those will be my two solutions, x equal to 0 or x equal to a negative 3. This one now, you need to use factorization here, right? So to use factorization, you multiply the 2 with the 3, so that will give you 6, right? And then you write all the factors of 6. It will be 6 and 1, it will be 3 and 2. Now what do I want? I want my middle term to be a negative 1. So it means I definitely need to use the 3 and the 2. So it must be negative 3 and plus 2. So you can simplify this and write it as 2x squared minus 3x plus 2x minus 3, right? And then equal to 0. Then you rearrange this so that you can then factorize it and take out a common fact. So it becomes 2x squared plus 2x minus 3x minus 3 equal to 0. Some people really don't do this. They go straight to opening binomials, which is perfectly fine. But here it's just for people like myself who are still trying to understand this, right? So here my common factor will be 2x into x plus 1. And then my common factor here will be minus 3, which will be into x plus 1 equal to 0. Then already you can see my factors will be 2x minus 3 and x plus 1 equal to 0. Then I have x equal to negative 3 over 2, or positive 3 over 2, sorry, or my x will be equal to minus 1, right? Remember, I'm going to take each bracket, equate it to 0, and then I solve from there. But some people, from the question itself, they go straight to opening the two brackets, and then they then equate each bracket to 0. It's really fine. Remember, it's all about what is it that you understand so that you can get all the marks that you deserve. Now here I have also solved for x. With this one, I will need to square this thing both sides because I'm trying to get rid of the square root there. So this will be squared and the negative 3 will be squared. And on the left-hand side, I will just have x on its own because the squared will cancel with that root, and then it will be equal to, then the negative 3 squared will give me a positive 9 there. And that will be my answer there. So the value of x will just be one value there. Now, this is where the interesting things come in now. Here, what you then need to look at when dealing with these kinds of equations is At the end of you solving the question, you always need to test the two answers that you're going to get, because the likelihood is one of them is not going to work and the other one is going to work, right? Or both of them are going to work. But there's a great chance that one of them will definitely not work. So you need to make sure that you do test them before you can conclude that, no, both of them are answers, right? But let me show you what I mean. So this is going to be, firstly, you make sure that the z is on its own, equal to x plus 1. And then I square both sides like we did with the previous one. So this becomes x plus 3 equal to, right? I square there, I square here. Remember, this will be a binomial and a binomial, which will be x squared plus 2x plus 1. Then let's simplify this. It becomes 0 equal to x squared. Then the x moving to the other side will be plus x. The 3 moving to the other side will be minus 2. And then I will just write this in standard form for you. So it will be x squared plus x minus 2 equal to 0, because that's really how we are used to it. So at the moment I have x squared plus x minus 2 equal to 0. Let me just verify quickly. Yes. And then to factorize this, it will be x equal to 0. The x and x, the 2 there must be 2 and 1. Because the middle term is a positive, it means my signs must be, the bigger factor must be a plus. Because the last term is a minus, remember I said you need to look at that. The brackets will have different signs. Therefore, x will be equal to minus 2, or x will be equal to positive 1, right? So please remember these two answers, minus 2 and 1. Let's go back to the question. If I substitute minus 2 here, it's going to be square root of minus 2 plus 3 minus 2, right? And this must be equal to 1. If it is not equal to 1, then minus 2 is not one of the answers. So this will be square root of 1 plus 2 equal to 1. So already you can see it's 3, which is definitely not equal to 1. So minus 2, we don't deal with it. Let's look at the other one, which is 1. If I substitute 1 there, it will be square root of 1 plus 3, and then minus 1, and this must be equal to 1. So square root of 1 plus 3 is the same as square root of 4, which is 2 minus 1. It is definitely equal to 1. So 1 will be equal to 1. Then you conclude, therefore, x is equals to 1. Some people even go as far as saying, comma, x is not equals to negative 2. It's really a choice. You can say is that it is just equal to 1 and say it is not equal to negative 2, or you can just leave it as x is equal to 1, or leave it as just x is not equal to negative 2, meaning it is the other one, right? So with this one, guys, what you need to understand with this particular question is, as soon as I give you an equation that has a set, right, a square root, you need to make sure that the square root is on its own on one side, and everything else that is next to it must be then added and subtracted such that it is on the other side. And then only then can you take out a square root on both sides. Why am I saying this? Because let me show you. If I gave you square root of x plus 1 equal to maybe 3, right? And then you choose to just square it from here. If I square here and I square there, automatically you can see that the square root will still be there, because this is going to be x and then plus 2 square root of x plus 1 equal to 9. So the square root is still there. So meaning you still have something that is a bit complex to deal with. So that's why it's just easier for you to always take everything to one side and leave whatever that is inside the square root to be on its own. Guys, I hope that clarifies a few things about factorizing and also about solving for x when you are giving equations that have to do with some square roots, and also the principle of solving when you have two brackets that are already factorized for you. Please don't then, the first example, don't multiply out the x inside the bracket. That's just gonna set you back, because you're gonna need to go back and then take out a common factor again, which is really a lot of work. So just make sure that you do understand that. For now, I know we've had so much fun so far. I need you to just take a walk a bit and get some water as you are walking, so that you can just free your brain, because I know algebra can be a bit daunting for you, but I'll be back with some more just after the quick ad break. Hi guys, welcome back from the ad break. So I hope you are now refreshed, you've had a glass of water, and you are ready to roll. Right now guys, we're going to look at some quadratic equation, we're going to look at quadratic formula, that is, and we're going to look at some completing the square. I know that completing the square is one of the topics that gives you guys quite a challenge, but then you have me today and we're gonna sort that out. So let's just have a look at what exactly is it that completing the square is all about. But before that, we're still gonna take out a square root on both sides, just to see exactly what happens when I take out a square root, right? One thing I need to mention though before we continue is, remember that when you have a squared, the idea is that your answers need to be 2. Right? If I have x squared, that tells me that my solutions will be 2. If I have x on its own, then my solution will be 1. So please understand that. And then at the later stage, you know, if it's x cubed, then I have 3 solutions. So the exponent, the leading one, always tells you how many solutions you have. That will really be important to what I'm gonna say next. Let's have a look. So, right now, if I have what we call a quadratic equation, 1, to solve a quadratic equation by taking the square root, right? Taking a square root is always a plus or minus situation. Let me make an example. If I have x squared is equals to 4, right? Let's solve this using factorization, which we just did. This is going to be x squared minus 4 equal to 0. Difference of 2 squares. Then I open 2 brackets. X minus 2, x plus 2 equal to 0. Then you can see one x will be a positive 2, the other x will be a negative 2. What am I saying? There's a plus there, there's a minus there. Hence, it's always plus or minus. So if I just say x squared equal to 4 and I decided to take out a square root on both sides, this will be the same as x is equals to plus or minus 2. But I just showed you how to then make sense of that using factorization. If the equation is in the form of x squared equal to c, like the one that I did, then you know that your answer is always going to be plus or minus the square root of c. Similarly with what I have, or x plus or minus k squared is equals to the c there. It's the same concept that you would have a plus or minus situation. Now, when we talk about completing the square, to summarize what completing the square is all about, this is to write a quadratic equation in terms of a square equal to a constant. What do I mean? What I just spoke about. In the form of x squared equal to c. This is a square and this is a constant, right? Or x plus k all squared equal to c. This is a square and that is a constant. That's what completing the square is all about. And then you can take out a square root on both sides and then solve for your x. But we'll talk about that. Let's look at the very first step. I'm going to give you the equation ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0 because I want to make it as standard as possible. Not just to make it for a specific question, because a lot of people think that then it must always be just x squared plus 2x plus 3. No, it can be just general. The first thing that you need to always do is to make sure that the coefficient of x squared is 1 by dividing everything by a, right? So if I divide everything by a, this will be x squared, this will be b over ax, and this will be c over a. And then 0 divided by a will just be 0. Then my step 2 will be you add or subtract the constant to both sides so that the equation is in the form of. You call this, I know that you have a word that you like so much, transposing, right? Remember what I said. This is going to be x squared plus b over ax plus c over a equal to 0. What does this step mean? It just means that take this to the other side. That's what you normally call it, right? You're transposing the value. That's the language you guys normally use when you're talking about this. Then it becomes a minus c over a. And then you go to my third step. The third step is what makes completing the square to be what it is. What do I mean? Add the square of half the coefficient of the x term on both sides. What is that? Let me go back. My coefficient of x is b over a. So it will be b over a. Firstly, you half it, and then you square it, and then add it on both sides. So this will be the same as b over 2a, all of this squared. So that's what I mean. And then you take this thing that I have here and add it on both sides. That's what step 3 says, right? So I'm adding it here and I'm adding it there. Now let me explain why you are adding it, guys. You are adding it because remember in mathematics, as soon as you introduce something new, it must be such that that thing can be reversed. For it to be reversed means you are not changing the equation. Because if you just say, let me add it to the left, the equation is no longer what I gave you. Then it's a different thing altogether. It's the same as that concept of rationalizing. You remember, what you do at the top, you must do at the bottom. What you do on the left-hand side, you must do on the right-hand side. It's just to maintain balance so that you don't change the equation. Because as soon as you introduce something that changes the equation, already you are lying. I'm not going to say you are wrong, you are lying, because you know the truth, but you decide not to give me the truth. So please do pay attention to that. Now, the last one will be factorize the left side as a square of a binomial, right? So if I go back to this, if I factorize this, I will take whatever that is in squared there, you put it in brackets and then square it outside. That's just a short way of explaining it. So if you factorize the left-hand side, it will then be that. Then the right-hand side, if you simplify it, it will then give you that. But you know, from here you need to take out a square root on both sides. If you take out a square root on both sides, remember, it must be plus or minus. I did tell you that. Now, why am I making you understand this? Look at this. If I have x plus q all squared is equal to r, this is the same as x plus q equal to plus or minus the square root of a. That's very important, guys. This plus or minus is really, really important because it's what makes you get full marks, right? If you don't have the plus or minus, then you will get your 3 out of 4 marks because for the last answer, it would then be wrong. Now, the solution of the equation are normally given by the solutions rather. The formula x is equals to minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. You know this is a quadratic formula. You do not need to then cram this formula, guys, please. You just need to know how to apply it because it's going to be there in your information sheet. So make sure you just understand it. Because of this plus or minus, you will have two solutions, one with the plus and one with the minus, right? So that's what makes it to be two solutions. Because I said to you, squared always tells you that you must have two answers, not one. As soon as you have one answer, you have done something very wrong. Now let's solve this by the form of completing the square, right? I said always make sure the coefficient of x squared is 1. If it is 1, then you skip step 1. You go straight to step 2. So this will be x squared minus 4x equal to negative 2. That's my step 2, right? Let me just say S2. And then step 3 was you add half of the coefficient squared, right? So that will be x squared minus 4x plus negative 4 multiplied by 1 over 2 all squared equal to negative 2 plus minus 4 by 1 over 2 all squared. And then you can then do the necessary things. So simplify it first quickly. Becomes minus 4x plus negative a half multiplied by negative 4 will then give me a negative 2, and then squared. This will be equal to, this will be negative 2 plus negative 2 squared is just going to be 4. I've already simplified it on the right. And then if you go further than this, it will then be x minus 2 all squared is equals to, remember on the right hand side it will be minus 2 plus the 4, which will give me positive 2. Square root both sides, this will be x minus 2 equal to plus or minus the square root of 2. Then my solutions will then be x is equals to 2 plus square root of 2, or x is equals to 2 minus square root of 2, right? Firstly, it's me taking that a negative to that side, which becomes a positive. That's where the 2 comes from, and then the plus and the minus. Let's look at another example. Solve for x by completing the square, the same concept. But here you can see, firstly, I must make sure that the coefficient is 1. So this becomes x squared minus 3 over 2x minus 7 over 2 equal to 0. Then it becomes x squared minus 3 over 2x equal to 7 over 2, right? And then you apply what makes the completing the square. X squared minus 3 over 2x plus negative 3 over 2 multiplied by 1 over 2 all squared. What you do on the left, you must do on the right. So it's 7 over 2 plus negative 3 over 2 by 1 over 2 all squared. Then let me quickly look at what I have here, and then I will simplify it on the next page. So it will then be x squared minus 3 over 2x plus, in the brackets here, it's supposed to be minus 3 over 4. I hope I have that right. Squared equal to, let me just verify, minus 3 over 2 by half is negative 3 over 4, yes. Therefore, it will be 7 over 2 plus, if I simplify this, it gives me 9 over 16. And then you can then do what is the completing the square. Minus 3 over 4. All of this is squared equals to, this I must make sure that the denominators are the same, right? If I do that, this will be multiplied by 8, that will be multiplied by 8. And then you can then simplify it further. So it will be 7 over 2 plus 9 over 16. Then you can take out a square root on both sides, which will then give you x minus 3 over 4 equals to plus or minus the square root of 7 over 2 plus 9 over 16. Then you can simplify it from there. Now, this one, as soon as you see the word leave your answer in simplest said form. They are simply saying use the quadratic equation. You can even use completing the square, but if they don't specifically say by completing the square, it means that you just need to use a quadratic equation. So firstly, my a value there is 1, my b value there is -3, my c value there is 1. So it will be x equals to minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac. All of this is divided by 2a. And then you can then simplify this. Minus, the b we said is -3, so it will be -3, plus or minus the square root of -3 squared will be then 9, minus 4 into the a value will be 1, the c value will be also 1, not negative, right? Let me quickly remove that. So it will just be a positive 1. And then you can then work this out all over, by the way, 2, because it's going to be 2 multiplied by 1. Then if I simplify this, it will then be x is equals to positive 3 plus or minus 9 minus 4 times 1 times 1 is just 4, right? So 9 minus 4 is 5. So this is square root of 5 over 2. That's your answer. Then you can separate the plus and separate the minus. Then it will give you your answer. The last one now quickly will then be this one, right? This is my A, that is my B, that is my C. Here, what do you need to do? You need to then use what you call the quadratic formula, but now you need to press your calculate and make sure that you round it off to 2 decimal places. So this will be minus 2x squared minus 4x plus 1 equal to 0. Then you can just maybe get rid of the negative there. It becomes 2x squared plus 4x minus 1 equal to 0. Then you go straight to the formula. X equals to, the b is a positive 4, so minus 4 plus or minus the square root of, I will have 16 there, minus 2, right? Minus 4 into 2, I mean, sorry. And then divided by 2 into the 2 there, which will simplify to minus 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 8 will be 8 over 4. Then you press your calculator there, it will give you 2 decimal places when you separate them and round it off to those. So I hope that makes sense, guys. So this is mainly when a question cannot be factorized, right? The equation cannot be factorized. You can either go to completing the square or go to the quadratic equation, and your life will be easier. But even questions that can be factorized, you can just use a quadratic equation. Only if the question did not say factorize and they just said solve for x. But if they say solve for x and you use a quadratic equation, I mark it wrong. So you listen to the instructions. Guys, I hope you are still having some fun. Let's take a quick ad break and I'll be back with some more. Hi guys, welcome back. I hope you've been having so much fun. Guys, algebra is really nice, I promise you. Only if you follow the necessary rules. If you do not and you do your own thing, where there is an equal sign, you then remove it, or wherever there is not, then you add it, or you subtract when you're supposed to add. Those are just the little things that are going to give you a problem, I promise you. Make sure that you do understand algebra, guys. Algebra is in every chapter of mathematics. In geometry, there is some algebra that you need to do when you are adding and subtracting. In stats, there is some algebra that you need to do. So just make sure that you really get a grasp of what algebra is all about. Now we're going to look at the very last concept of algebra, especially question 1. This is simultaneous equations. Guys, simultaneous equations has a lot of marks. You need to get those marks. Solving for x normally it's like 2 marks, 3 marks, 4 marks. But with simultaneous equations, most of the time, the minimum is 5 marks, and then the maximum is normally like your 7 marks. Imagine they give you 7 marks just for free. You know, as people normally say, just for control. So you must make sure that you do get those marks, please. But before you do that, let me tell you what simultaneous equation is all about. So, when we talk about equations with fractions first, right, because that's what we normally use when we're talking about simultaneous, we can then solve these by first multiplying, right? What are we multiplying by? The LCD on both sides. We are making sure that we don't have any denominators, and then we can then hoy everything that needs to be done there. It is also important to make restrictions. What do I mean? The denominator must not be 0. You know, on that nice thing of yours that you like called a calculator, as soon as you divide by 0, it will say undefined or it will say error. So make sure that you make those restrictions. If maybe you have a over x minus 1, the x value can never be 1, right? So my restriction is x cannot be equal to 1. Because as soon as x becomes 1, it becomes 1 minus 1, which is 0. And a over 0, unless you can solve it, it will forever be undefined. Now, with simultaneous equations, it's when you are solving for 2 variables in 2 equations simultaneously. What does simultaneously mean? At the same time, concurrently, one after the other, right? And we normally use what we call the substitution method, right? There's also elimination method, which I know you know about, but mainly, if you are having a linear equation and a quadratic equation, just try to use substitution at all times, because really that's the one that you always mostly gonna get, a simultaneous that has a linear and a quadratic equation. Then always look for the variable that is easiest to isolate. Guys, you know, this one is one point that worries me the most, because you guys will have a 2x squared plus 3x plus 5 equal to y squared, I mean. And then a person will try and make the x squared to be the subject of the formula, and they want to take out the square root. Why are you troubling yourself like this? Just look at the variable that is easier. So you look at the equation that has one variable that you can just make the subject of the formula, and then everything else to one side. But if you have 2 x's and one is squared and the other one is squared, then x cannot be made the subject of the formula there. If you have 2 y's, one is squared and the other one is not, y cannot be made the subject of the formula there. So please make sure that you do understand that. Subject of the formula means it's only one x, and then on the other side, it's y and constants, not any other x, right? So that's what I mean when I say, look at the one that is easiest to isolate. But let's look at some questions just to try and see exactly what do I mean. Now, firstly, I said fractions, right? Here I said we must multiply by the LCD. So my LCD first will be equals to x minus 1, right? What do you do with the LCD? You multiply every term by the LCD. So it becomes x multiplied by x minus 1 plus 2 over x minus 1 multiplied by x minus 1 equal to 4 multiplied by x minus 1. Then you can see that your x minus 1 and your x minus 1, that's a numerator and denominator, will divide each other. And then from there, I will have x squared minus x plus 2. And then on that side, it will become minus 4x and then plus 4 equal to 0, right? So I multiply that, it becomes 4x. Take it to the other side, it becomes a minus 4x. You multiply those two, it becomes minus 4. The other side, it becomes a positive. And then from there, this will be x squared, like term, the x and the 4x, which will give me minus 5x. And then the 2 and the 4, which will give me plus 6 equal to 0, right? And then you will have x, because I need to factorize this quickly, it will be x and x. I need the factors of 6 such that they give me 5, but my sign must be a negative and a negative, right? So that will either give me plus 6 and minus 1 equal to 0, right? And then you can then simplify this. The 6 must be a negative, sorry about that. The 6 must be a negative because the middle term is a negative, right? So this will be a negative and that will be a plus. So minus 6 plus 1 is negative 5. Minus 6 times that will be a negative 6. So it means the 6 and the 1 will not work then, you see. So that's how you then try to test these answers. So lastly, my actual factors will then be negative 3 and minus 2. And then my x will be equals to positive 3, or my x will be equals to positive 2. But what is my restriction? X can never be 1. That's all that you need to know about the restriction. And then you will be done. But with these two, you can see already they will both work, right? Because none of them will give me the denominator as a 0. Now, let's look at simultaneous. Simultaneous, they will always say to you, solve for x and y. But don't make the mistake of thinking at all times you will start with solving for x. At times you will start with solving for y. But then here it's convenient that we're actually going to start with x. But it's not always the case. So you label this equation 1, you label that one equation 2. And then you will then say from equation 1, I create equation 3, where I isolate one variable. So it becomes x is equals to 5 minus 3y. And we call this equation number 3. And then I will say substitute equation number 3 into equation number 2, right? So it's a language, this thing, guys. You're communicating with me. You are telling me what you are doing. Therefore, this will be 5 minus 3y. All of this is squared minus 3 into 5 minus 3y. And why do I have a lot of equal signs here? Oh, this is supposed to be a plus. Sorry about that, guys. I have a lot of equal signs. So it's like I'm doing what you like the most, where you add a lot of equals to there. And then plus 10y equals to 8y squared minus 18, right? And then you simplify this quickly. It therefore gives me 25 there. Minus 5 times that is 15 by 2, it becomes 30y, and then plus 9y squared minus 15 plus 9y plus 10y minus 8y squared, and then plus 18 equal to 0. And then I will then simplify it from here, right? So the 25 and the 15 and the 18 are like terms. So 25 minus 15 is 10. Plus the 18 will give me 28. So already I know that I have plus 28, right? And then minus 30 plus 9y will give me minus 21y. And then do I have another y here? Yes, the 10y there. So 21y minus 21y plus 10 will be minus 11y. So this is minus 11y. Let's look at the y squared. 9y squared and minus 8y squared. It becomes just y squared, right? So this will be y squared equal to 0. And then you factorize this, right? If it's possible to factorize. If you don't know how to factorize, just go to your calculator quickly, and then you can then solve it from there, right? So I need 28, and you look at what are the factors of 28 such that I will get 11. So I will just write them here. 28 will then be 14 and 2, right? Which gives me 10 normally. And I will have also, let me just check something, guys. I think there's one value that we did not do right here, because then I must get it to be a 10, right? So I have minus 30 plus 9, that's minus 21, right? And then plus 10, that's minus 11, okay? So that is fine. 25, 15, that gives me 10. And then the 18 there, that gives me 28, okay? So we did do the right thing. And then 9y squared and the 8y squared will definitely give me y squared, all right? So you can see then, if you are not able to find your factors, you just go to the quadratic equation, right? So quickly, I'm just going to test this quickly. This is going to be 121 minus 4 into 28, right? And then you can see that 121 minus 4 multiplied by the 8 there will give me 32. That's 2 there. Sorry. And then 4 multiplied by that will be 8. So that will be 11 there. 121 minus 112. It will then give me 9, right? So it will be square root of 9. So this will be 3, right? So already you can see that I do have my factors. So what must I multiply with 3 so that it gives me the 28 will then be what you then need to do, right? So I'm just running out of time, but that's what you will then need to do there. So this means it will actually be 11 plus 3 over 2, which is equals to 7. Good, you see. So now I have y minus 7 and y minus 3. Do you see? So you don't necessarily then need to give up because you are not finding the answer, right? So I was just trying to test for you so that you can see what's happening. And then from there, my y will be equals to 7, or my y will be equals to 3. And then substitute this into equation 3. Remember, our equation 3 was 5 minus 3y. So it was x is equals to 5 minus 3 by 7, which will give me 5 minus 21, which will be negative 17. And then here it will be x is equals to 5 minus 3 by 3, and then it will be 5 minus 9, and this will be equals to negative 4, right? So let's just verify quickly. This is actually 16, not 17, so this is 16. You see, so please do make sure that you look at your answers once you are done. So that's what simultaneous is all about. Now the summary is you solve quadratic equations by factorizing, completing the square, and the quadratic formula. Always check your solutions. That was our roadmap. Guys, I hope you've had so much fun. I showed you that you can fumble around. As you are doing that, you are just doing what it's necessary for you to solve this. I've had so much fun. From me, the Maths Doctor, until I see you next time. Remember, mathematics is food for the soul.